Hello everyone and welcome back. Imagine reaching into a drawer, an old coin jar, or a family box of keepsakes and pulling out a dark brown coin, larger and heavier than the modern pennies you see today. On the obverse side, the young portrait of Queen Elizabeth II looks right, wearing her simple laurel wreath crown, elegant and regal yet youthful. And on the reverse, the powerful figure of Britannia seated proudly with a trident and shield in her hands. The coin you're holding is a 1963 one penny from the United Kingdom. And while it may seem like just a piece of old change, for collectors it carries both history and some potential value. Today, let us walk through the story of this coin, its design, its production, what very fine condition really means for a 1963 penny, and how much it's worth in today's market when converted into U.S. dollars. The 1963 Queen Elizabeth II penny is part of the pre-decimal British coinage system, which existed before the United Kingdom moved to decimalization in 1971. Back then, 12 pence made a shilling, and 20 shillings made a pound. That means 240 pennies were required to equal 1 pound sterling. The penny was a significant coin because of its size, weight, and long history in British currency. By 1963, the United Kingdom was still using bronze pennies that were 30.8 millimeters across and weighed about 9.4 grams. If you've ever held one, you know it feels substantial in the hand, far larger than the pennies we see today. Now, the obverse design of the coin features the first definitive portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, created by the artist Mary Gillick. This portrait is special because it shows the Queen without a crown, only a simple laurel wreath tied with a ribbon. This youthful and fresh image of Her Majesty was used on British coins from her coronation in 1953 until 1967. So the 1963 penny falls within that early period of her reign. The reverse, designed by Leonard Charles Wyon, depicts Britannia, the female personification of Britain. She is seated, facing right, wearing a classical helmet, holding a trident in her left hand, and resting her right hand on a shield that bears the Union Jack. Below her, the denomination, 1 penny, is clearly inscribed, and the date, 1963, sits prominently at the bottom. Unlike coins from certain other nations, these British pennies carry no mint mark, because all were struck at the Royal Mint in London. In terms of mintage, the 1963 penny is not rare in the absolute sense. More than 175 million pieces were struck that year. With such a high production figure, many of them survived, and countless examples still exist today in collections, old jars, and even in circulation until the early 1970s when decimalization finally removed them. Because of this large mintage, the coin is generally considered common. But condition is what makes the difference between a coin that is worth only its metal value and a coin that attracts collector attention. When we talk about very fine condition, we are using an official grading standard that tells us how worn the coin is. A 1963 penny in very fine grade shows moderate but even wear across the high points of the design. On the obverse, Queen Elizabeth's hair still shows clear strands in parts, though the highest details may be worn smooth. Her cheek and jawline remain well defined, but not sharp as in higher grades. On the reverse, Britannia's trident, shield, and drapery lines are still clear, although there is visible smoothing in the finer parts of her figure. The lettering remains sharp, and the coin overall retains good detail and eye appeal, though you can see it has spent time in circulation. For a coin that's over 60 years old, very fine is a solid grade that balances age with visible design. So what is the value of a 1963 Queen Elizabeth II penny in today's market if it grades very fine? In the United Kingdom, collectors typically pay between 1 and 3 British pounds for such a coin, depending on its exact eye appeal. Converted into U.S. dollars, that's usually around $2 to $5 in the regular collectors market. In higher grades such as extremely fine or uncirculated, the price can rise to $10. $15, or even $25 for brilliant examples with luster intact. Proof versions and sets, which were struck in much smaller quantities, can be worth even more. But the ordinary circulation strike 1963 penny in very fine condition is valued at just a few dollars in the U.S. market. However, there are always exceptions that make collecting coins fascinating. Some coins from this year show striking errors, like off-center strikes, die cracks, or planchet flaws. These minting mistakes can push the value well beyond the typical few dollars, sometimes into the tens or hundreds, depending on how dramatic and well-preserved the error is. Collectors love unique pieces, and error coins are always in demand. Another factor that adds value is provenance. If a coin comes from a famous collection, or is certified by a major grading service like NGC or PCGS, buyers may pay more for it, even if it is the same date and grade as another piece. For anyone inspecting a 1963 penny at home, here's what to look for. First, check the date clearly at the bottom of the reverse. Make sure the details of Britannia are still visible. Can you see the helmet, the trident, and the folds of her dress? Flip to the obverse and examine the Queen's portrait closely. Look for how much detail remains in the hair and in the laurel wreath. If those details are mostly present, you may be looking at a very fine or higher coin. Then, check the rims and lettering to ensure they read complete and not heavily worn. Finally, under good light, tilt the coin and inspect it for any unusual lines, doubling, or misstrikes that could signal an error. It's also important to know what not to do. Do not clean the coin. Many beginners think shining an old penny will make it worth more. But in reality, cleaning destroys the natural patina and surface detail that collectors prize. Cleaning can cut the value of a coin in half or more. Instead, keep it in a soft holder, a coin flip, or even a small envelope until you know more. So where can you sell or buy such coins? In today's market, online auction platforms like eBay have many listings for 1963 pennies, and you'll see their real-time values reflected in the sold listings. Local coin shops and collectors, fairs in the UK and US also carry these coins, and often price them modestly in the $2 to $5 range for very fine examples. If you happen to find an error piece or an unusually high-grade survivor, that's when professional grading and auctions may be the better option, because the higher prices will only come with certification and buyer confidence. To sum it up, the 1963 United Kingdom Queen Elizabeth Roman II 1 penny coin is a beautiful piece of British pre-decimal history. With over 175 million minted, it is not rare, but in very fine condition it carries both historical appeal and modest market value. In today's United States market, that value is usually around $2 to $5. Higher grade examples, errors, or proofs can climb higher. But the typical circulation coin is a collectible that's affordable and accessible to almost anyone. And that is part of the charm. A coin that once circulated through everyday hands in Britain during the 1960s can now be found, held, and appreciated by collectors all over the world. Even if it doesn't make you rich, it connects you directly to history. And that connection is priceless. Thank you for watching the entire video. You can tell us in the comments what we should make the next video about.